All right, I think we are good to go. Sorry about the delay, everybody. Let me see. I think my mic might be too loud. Hold on, let me just take a look here, guys. Just want to make sure all the settings are set up. I was having some resolution issues, where it was basically telling me, yeah, we're good. All right, sorry about that. Just had to launch it up on my phone so I can make sure the audio is good. All right, so what's going on, everybody? We are taking a look today at the dynamic parkour tree system in its current form. Now, a couple of things to note: we are still, or I say we like the royal we, still working on the overall system. There's still a lot of things that I'm going to be adding in and improving as things go on. So this is kind of like I guess you could call it the early showcase. Certain things have been put into place in the way that they're going to be by the time that the system is done, everything's uploaded, and it's available to you. However, I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of an earlier look. In version 1 and version 2, for those of you who actually have been using it since the beginning, there's a level of consistency. I've put a lot of actions basically, with like vaulting and mantling and specific iterations of things. And I wanted to open things up a little bit more with this version of the system. So there's a lot of changes as far as like animation selection, as well as a ton of control that can now be had. So here I'm going to show you guys kind of a quick example of how the system looks right now. And I've got a frame tracker here up on the side. You can see that way you guys can take a look at like how things are actually being, interacting during the actual performance stage of things. So, simple vault actions. You can see we got a tic-tac action there. We got mantle actions. We've got, and some nice smoothing on the mantle actions too. One thing I will say that I've been very much enjoying is the fluidity that certain things have been showing with these new improvements. Now, again, we're going to be looking at all the different pieces that make up all of this. So, right now I'm just kind of running around showing you guys how everything is going to look. But, like here we got a nice tic-tac action. We got a lot more motion, a lot more fluidity, a lot more control there. Keep panning my camera into the wall. I don't know why. As well as climbing is now available on more complex geometry. You can see this hodgepodge of cubes that I've made here. So like even something like this, you can see it's attaching and defining as a climb space and is able to properly define locations for example, like you can see here we got the two locations for the corner edge and the actual like endpoint for the height. So that's would be like for a corner transition. And the cool part is even with this complex geometry here, there's a lot of validations but not in overabundance of. So like one thing that you're going to notice is like, I'll just show you here. So we saw that like this area here was, we were able to climb on it. But if I take this here, which is just kind of like a cylinder, I've rounded out. If I take this and I move it down and I put it on the corner here. So I just kind of make it so that way this corner is no longer flattened. And I'll put it on only one area of it. And we'll move it down. The fun times of level design. Am I right, guys? All right, so if I go ahead and hit play, hopefully not starting in the floor like that. Where am I? There we go. So if I go ahead and I hit play now, you're going to notice that at this spot, we can go ahead and we can climb. However, if I go over and try to attach from this location, he now ignores that spot and goes up. Now, the reason why he actually was able to still find that is just due to the fact that currently I do have settings like traces extending a little more forward than what you would normally have. But I'm doing this purposefully to showcase that even in situations where you're deciding like, hey, this doesn't matter, as long as you don't have your traces going too far forward in the settings menu, which, we're going to take a look at all of that as we go through. Not looking to rush things, it's a nice little live stream. We're going to hang out, we're going to chill, we're going to take a look at some cool stuff. So I'm not looking to try and rush things too much, but I'm not trying to make it boring for you guys either. Now, let's take a look at some of the things that are, you're going to use to control a lot of this stuff. Because as I said, sorry, I'm just trying to mess with my words here. As I had said, we have a lot of changes, or I have a lot of changes that I've added into the system. So the first thing I want to show you guys is the event structure. Now, in the past, in the old system, there was, wall vault, wall mantle, regular, normal, like medium-sized vaults and mantle, and each one of these was its own execution. Not really the best approach, at least in my eyes. I feel like, realistically, outside of just standard jumping actions or drop type actions, right? You're realistically vaulting and mantling is kind of a pretty standard element, whether you're doing this from a higher height or you're using a sidewall to get up, you're still going onto or over, which is ultimately what a mantle or vault is. So I've now pushed everything. I keep saying we, like there's some sort of team behind me, but we now have this. So event ground action. Now, this calculate best ground action is actually sort of my own creation for UE 5.1 and on, for people who are using this version and don't have access to the choosers. Because realistically, let's be honest, for those of us who have messed around with motion matching, it's awesome. I mean, that game animation sample project is probably one of the most fluid templates I've ever seen. Now, granted, I don't spend a lot of time in templates, so this could just be my own ignorance, I will admit. But ultimately, it's a great system. But it does require exposed values. So rather than making it so that way, we've got one version of the system that's going to be for, the motion matching side of things. And another one that might be if you're using an older version of UE, like 5.1 and above. We want to make it so that way it's something that's more universal. And this is what I've come up with, is where we've got now height, length, and distance to object calculations happening, outputting into a newly created function, which is calculate best ground action. There's going to be a similar function for climbing. I just haven't quite gotten all that fully together yet, so I might not showcase that in this live stream today. But we are going to be taking a look at a couple things related to climbing, so don't worry. But anyways, so when we're going in and we're choosing actions, right, you see we have suggest mantle as well, which is just going to basically be a selector, and then it goes into this, which it's more or less what it's going to do is going to kind of select the animation that best matches the output calculations. Now, there's going to be, a settings area where you're going to be putting like minimums, values, and stuff like that. But ultimately, a lot of what you're going to be doing as far as your animation control is going to be now driven through a data table. And this is where things kind of get cool. So we'll come back to this here in a moment, and I'll show you guys the new data table structure that I've been working on for kind of really everything, just because it seems to offer a lot more modularity. And this, that's ultimately the goal. So let's see, it's going to be data tables. So you can see we got one for settings and one for montage selection. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the montage selection here. Now, you're going to notice there's only one row name right now, and that's because, actually, I'll explain that in a minute. I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So right now, all actions are going to be driven in through data tables rather than driven through, some sort of like custom creation or enum selection or things like that. I wanted to make it so that way you could have different selections of animations, maybe with different values and controlling elements. But the only real way to do that is through a data table. So here we have the new animation selection lister. So the way this works is you can see we have ground actions and climb actions. Okay. So when you first make it, these are going to be empty, and you would just make a new array item. See, we got index 2. So I'm just going to delete that. And for as many ground action types as you want to have, you can go ahead and add this in. So for me, I just kind of stuck it with the basic vault and mantle for right now. But ultimately you could have as many of these as you want, and I'll show you guys how, you go about selecting this. But once you have it in, so like for me, I've got, index 0, is my vaulting animations. So you can see that I've got height, length, distance to object, modifiers, which this part we're going to talk about here next in just a moment, and then montage selection. So kind of the way that this works is that you're going to put your montage into here, define the maximum value. So like this is the maximum height that this action can be taken on. This is the maximum distance it can be taken on. Distance to object, I've set to 0. Now, one thing I've tried to make sure is that you don't need to have values in there. If you set it to 0, it's just going to ignore it completely and be like, okay, cool. Yeah, we're not going to bother checking that. So you don't have to put in a value in, but if you're going to use a value, like if I had anything else here set for distance, which I don't, it's fine. But if you're wanting to use the distance value, you're going to want to set some sort of distance value on all of them, whether it be just like all of them are a minimum of this, and then like one animation might select another. I will say I'm hoping to find a better way to go about it. This way I can have a more matching selection system. But, you know, again, still early on. But as you saw early in the beginning there, we have a bunch of, you know, cool stuff that we can do. It's selecting all the actions based off of whatever's happening in the moment. So we got like, you know, a nice wall vault here because the height was above a certain value. This one we got the regular safety vault because there's nothing there. And then because we got a sidewall here, we go ahead and just boom, just like that. So we've got all of the same, you know, the same standard actions and functionality that we had in the previous system, utilizing things like 4 or 5 different functions or executions, I should say. And now is all being selected through one single data table and then just being calculated out through kind of its own little internal function that I've created for you guys. So the next thing, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about is the modifiers here. So, like I said, we got our height, length, and distance. Oh, and another thing I just want to note too, before I move on, because I was talking about the montages here. You can see here that we can actually, the montage is an array element, okay? Now, this is basically because I didn't want to remove the ability for you to be able to have, you know, like, for example, if you wanted to have a randomized selection, you know, have a few different vault animations being selected if it's within XX value. Well, in order to ensure that you were still able to have that, as I'm kind of controlling the animation selection a little bit more, I created it into an array element. So if you add more than one animation to this, it will just randomly select it. There is a condition under which that changes under the modifiers. And again, we're going to be talking about that here in just a minute. But here under index 3 here, you can see I've got 2 montage elements. I've got the tic-tac, and then under this one here, yeah, index 2, and then I've got the slide and the roll vaults. So if I go over to one of those objects that are within the range, so that'd be kind of like this one here. If I go up to it and just kind of do the vault, you can see he does the roll. Should be selecting the slide at some point here. It's just because it's a randomized selection. Let's see. Well, it looks like I might have to look into the randomizer a little bit. I will say it was working earlier, but you know, this is why nothing is released yet. We're still developing. But it should be choosing either one of these. I think I did add in a bit of an adjustment into things earlier today, and unfortunately, this week has been a lot. It took me about 4 days just to be able to get the math worked out for one of the functionalities for the new True Climb system. The thing that now works for allowing you to be able to define edges even on complex geometry like this. So like it definitely put me behind schedule a little bit more than I was hoping, but the goal is going to be that you'll be using this to be able to assign a random montage. So that's all that's going to be. Now, the modifiers, which is going to be the next part here that I want to show you guys, is essentially how you're going to control a lot of things, such as like tic-tac actions, for example. Because you saw, you know, we got tic-tac actions worked in for the vaulting and mantling. And if you see me looking down every so often, it's because I got my phone here next to me. I'm just trying to make sure to watch chat just in case anybody's trying to reach out, asking any questions. I know I'm blasting through things a little bit here. I just want to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on things in case you guys have any questions as we're moving along. But anyways, so here in the montage selection here, you can see that we've got under the, and again, this is going to be the ground actions, and then I got the 2 indexes here. So this is my vault. So ground action, sidewall, modifier, right? So I'm just pointing out things. I'm not expecting you to understand them. We're going to go into the explanation. But the way the modifiers work now, in the previous system, the way that it worked is that if it detected a sidewall and it was within, certain calculation, it would just choose the tic-tac type execution. In this one, you're going to actually just choose for that animation sidewall. And what that's going to do is that after it passes its validation checks, it's then going to go through and be like, oh, okay, cool. So we're going to do sidewall and we validated. Okay, select this action. You're no longer going to need to actually use multiple different executions, multiple different selections, more static heights and things like that. You're going to be able to do everything right off of this modifier list. And as you can see here, there's multiple modifiers that you can choose from. So we've got none, which is, just your standard, no modifier, no action, no nothing necessary. Then we also have sprint, drop off, sidewall, and action mod. Action mod is one of the new ones that's actually really, really cool. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. But sprint is the standard one it's always been, just a Boolean value that's worked into the system. Drop off is if there's a drop off detected in front of you. This one hasn't quite been fully worked in yet, so we're not really going to talk too much about this one here. And then sidewall is going to be if there is a sidewall detected and its orientation. So there is a full rotation and predicted vector, I guess, calculation that's going into this now. So this way it ensures that the sidewall that's being detected is a valid sidewall for the tic-tac type action. So you're not going to get like when you're rotated towards an object and, it kind of detects a tic-tac instead of a mantle or whatever. You won't get that anymore. Now, the action mod here, though, is really cool. Now, you see here that we've got action modifier use index. So don't worry too much about this right now. We'll come back to this in just a minute. And this is kind of all going to circle back to a couple of other things, too. Like I said, there's a lot with this, guys. But what you end up getting in a result, though, is freaking awesome. At least I think so. But that's why I'm doing this. If you see anything you guys don't like, you see something that makes you go, oh my God, my head hurts just looking at that, tell me. I will do my best to try and figure out another way to go about it. I'm always trying to make things the best version that I can. But anyways, so we have the action modifier here. Now, to be able to set this, if we go into the Parkour trace system here and go into the for use variables here, right now they're split out because one's with spaces, one's without. Unreal Engine, I love it. But you're going to see here we have action modifier list. So what this is actually a customizable array list that you can set up yourself. And realistically, in order to define it, all you need to do is just drag off and go action mod, and see action modifier list, set array element. So when you make one, so like let's say for example, you want to set something so that way, if your weapon is out or if your character is in a certain other state, something unique to your game. You want to maybe change how things are actually going to be, reacting within the system. Well, you can use this action modifier list and create your own custom modifications. This will actually allow you to be able to set, unset using this item and index value. So like, for example, this is index 0. So index 0, this is index 1, and then you would just set this to 1. So whatever one you're trying to modify, you would just set that index and then set the Boolean value on it. This will allow you to be able to modify pretty much infinitely. Considering you can make as many variations of those, modifiers as you want. So it's actually really cool the way that it all works out. And I mean, you can set them off of basic input controls. You can set them up off of, player conditions or execution within your game. So you can really kind of work this into the system that you already have and make it work with it rather than trying to find those work-ins. Now, as I had said before, coming back to this, you'll see that we have the select integer here. Now, we're going to come back to the modifiers a little bit more after, but ultimately, that's kind of all it is we've got like over here is an example where I'm going left shift, I'm setting sprint to true, or, off release, then setting it to false. Left control, I'm setting the action modifier list of index 3 to true or false, so that's really all this is. Don't mind this part or this. These two shouldn't even be in view. So like that's really all these are, is you're basically going through and selecting what a modifier you want to be able to set to true or false, and you also have that standard sprint one. I left the sprint in just because it was a nice pre-made simple Boolean value that kind of indicated an increase of velocity. So rather than working in a preset modifier, if sprinting is true and it's going to go through and do a bunch of stuff for you, I figured I'd let you guys set the conditions. And that's, again, kind of the whole point with a lot of these updates is I'm trying to let you guys be the ones to set the conditions. I'm trying to be a lot less of, here's what I think should happen. I want you guys to be able to decide what happens and when. Because theoretically, this would open it up for any sort of movement. Anything that would be based off of an object's height, length, distance, you could theoretically use this system to be able to calculate it. And ground actions are just selected if no climbing state is detected. And the ledge area is not blocked. But, workarounds could easily be done to, skateboarding games, basketball. There's a ton of stuff you could do. As far as what the actual variations would be, it's hard to say right now. We're still early on. So, so what we're going to do, though, is talk a little bit about this selector. Because, just like with the modifier, there's an index-based reference here. So you can see we're selecting integer 1 if suggest mantle is true, which is basically just telling us that the other side of a possible vault area is blocked, or if it's just like a super long area. Okay. So if that's true, though, it's going to go in selection index. Now, if we go back to the montage selection here, you're going to see under ground actions, we have index 0 and index 1. So this is the reason why I created this as an array, because you can make as many as you want, and these ones are just vault, 0, mantle, 1. That's all. It's very, 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 very simple. Just using numerical values, because it's a little bit more friendly for the overall computation, because the more you work in ones and zeros, because realistically everything gets converted to binary at the end. The closer you are to that, the easier the conversion. So I'm trying to keep things within a lot of like selector index values and things like that, but without over complicating it. So, but again, 1 being mantle. So if suggest mantle, pick A, boom, done. All right. So now we're going in and selecting either a vault or mantle based off of system conditions. So, and again, it's all through that singular function. So like I said, there's going to be a lot more. The settings menu hasn't been fully ironed out yet, but I will show you guys that as well. So if I open up under data tables, we got the settings data table here. So this is another new feature that I've been working on, is rather than creating the settings inside of the actual parkour system, where it might get lost in with other things that are just part of an actor component or part of something else that might be added in. I wanted to make the things that are going to be the primary control elements. I wanted to put these as a direct component into the system, but make them separated just for cleanliness. So this is where we ended up at the data table. So just like with the montage selection, you can see we only have 1. And I'm pointing this out because of something that we're going to kind of, again, double back to once I explain the settings here. But the way it's going to break down now is you've got trace and calculation settings, which is just going to be for anything related to object tracing and distance-based calculations. So this is before it goes in and says, okay, what are our action selection values? And again, the action selection values are fairly generic. It's just climbing versus ground action is kind of more or less the ultimate difference. But you're going to notice we have initial object trace, which is just kind of looking for a possible blocking object, tracing the area in front of the player, looking for a drop-off possibly, as well as tracing out for the sidewalls. Then we got the sidewall check, which I put this separated because not everybody wants to use the tic-tac action. So rather than confusing things, I just put it into its own little sub-menu here. And then we get the found object collision trace settings here, which is basically just whenever it's found an object, you can set how far back it's going to go. You can set how high it's going to go, the length, and we're using box traces this time to be able to just add a more wider trace area for you guys. So to be able to make it so that way, it's going to be able to find things much easier. We're using the box traces instead of the sphere traces. Now, the other thing to note too is the climb trace settings here, again, all worked in, but the main value that's now controlling everything is going to be this new minimum ledge length. So rather than having this, is it this long or this long, blah, 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 all that crap, all right, we're taking all of that out and we're going minimum ledge length, and this is just setting a value. So right now I've got it set to 10. which is why it's able to find, you know, even small ledges. So if I go ahead and just drag that out here, if I pull this in like this, play from here, you can see that it's able to find that location. However, if I set the minimum ledge length to something like, I don't know, 50, just something a little bit larger than 10, you can see that it will no longer actually, I'm kind of pressing E and nothing's happening. So, and the reason why that's occurring is because it's beyond the value that we've set. So this is basically just going to be the main thing that's going to be like, okay, a ledge has to be at least this value. Now there is angle checks and a whole bunch of other things that are going on. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm just kind of like adding things in unnecessarily. But, you know, there's a whole bunch of things going on that'll verify whether or not it's a valid area. But as far as like how far, what the distance is and things like that, it's one single number. This just clarifies and simplifies and makes things so much easier. So moving on here. So the next thing is the ground actions and the climbing actions. So we see, like I said before, we have clamp values. So these are the min and maximum values that can be used. If they're outside these values, they will be calculated differently for a ground action anyways. For climbing actions, it's a little bit different. If it's outside the max of 400, it's not going to do anything. And that's just kind of, you know, climbing is about as high up as you can go. If you can't do it from the ground, you can't do it from a climb, then you probably can't do it at all. But ultimately, this is just kind of indicating that it's not a normal walking space. And this is going to be, again, this area here, there's going to be a lot more to this because we're going to be adding in grinding. Or rail grinding, just to specify. There's also going to be balance beams, ladders, ledge walking, and a few other things that we're going to be adding in to the new system, which is why I'm kind of doing this showcase now, because I'm showing you guys kind of like the new version of the old system. While there's still a few things that I have to work out for sure, ultimately, most of this is going to be in its final form as it stands right now. So, just see one moment, please, people. There we go. I apologize. I just had to fix the live stream on my phone really quickly. All right, so now moving on here. Now, as I had said, we've got the montage selection and the settings menus here. We each have one row of these. Now, another reason why I created these as data tables rather than creating them as like individual settings menus and selections and things like that is because data tables actually have a really cool feature. If we set up one of these, we can click on duplicate, and now we have two versions of this, which means that you could set up as many settings menus as you wanted, with different values, different heights, different lengths, different whole bunch of controlling values. And you could set up as many of these as you like. And it'll be worked into like more of like an event begin play function. But if I go, let me see, default, DPT or DT settings use row index. So right now it's set to 0, but if I were to set this to something else and change the value, so like right now 0 is this one, because it's using index values. So, you know, 0 is 1, or 1 is 0, 2 is 1, so on and so forth. But yeah, you can have as many index values as you want of these setting structures, just like you can have as many as you want of these montage selection listings. And, you know, as far as how they work, you can adjust it in a variety of different ways. And that's the cool part of using the data table for the montage selection and the settings menus is that, let's say you have, you know, characters of different heights, or you have actors that might be able to go further or, you know, not as far, or maybe you want to change the conditions based off of world event structure, you know, like maybe the game shifts and your level's starting to change. You know, and you want to have these settings now be the thing that calculates instead of these settings. Well, you can absolutely do that. You know, and it's all just by multiplying however many setting structures you have here and adding and duplicating, and just, you know, you can create as many as you want. And the good thing about the duplication is that it keeps the original settings. So you only have to create whatever adjustment values you want. You don't have to go through and like refill out everything from scratch. So we're going to go ahead and just take those extra ones out of there like that. So this is going to be the new structure for things. So you're going to have data tables for all your settings, data tables for your montage selection, and you're going to be utilizing them kind of like this. Now, one thing you'll also notice is that I haven't shown any like add warp target. It's because it doesn't exist anymore. I've actually been able to pretty much bring all of the motion warping stuff. The adder update warp target is now internalized into the Parkour system in the component itself. So you will not have to actually add the adder update warp target and all of that stuff. You will not have to do that anymore. The only thing you're going to need to do is add in the same interface that you did last time, with the DPTS interface, and then the event ground action here, and then calculate best ground action. Now, same thing with climbing. Climbing is going to be broken up by climbing start, climbing end, climbing transitions. So this way you'll be able to adjust values, be able to start climbing from the ground or from the higher up, and be able to have different selection values. Same thing with dropping off, and it's also going to be providing back the climb type as well. So you'll be able to change it between like free climb, point, ledge, all the different types of climbing. You'll be able to actually change the animation selection based off of that as well. And just to show you here, the thing that I don't really want to show you guys, because this is the old version I had where I was using a ray value instead. But you can see we got suggested climb type, distance, and height. So you'll be able to use these values to be able to select your animations. But again, it's going to be split up between climb start, climb end, and climb transition. So there's gonna be a lot more modularity, but you can see that there's a lot more simplification as well. You don't have to do as much, initial setups and things like that, event calls. There is going to still be the one that feeds in the climbing direction values, but that's not going to be anything that's going to matter where if you're using your controller. That's the other thing I want to note, is that there's no longer any limitations on controller type. You can use controller, you can use keyboard and mouse, doesn't matter. It'll work just fine. So, and that's kind of like the main changes when it comes to the overall structure of the system. We've got the new event structure where we're calling, ground actions rather than, tic-tac, mantle, vault, all that stuff, and kind of just, letting things be decided based off of values that you can set in the system itself. And we can do everything, and you can see even here, like, we've got a nice climbing area here. And I don't know if you guys have been watching the side there, but the 120 has pretty much remained. Now I will say I do have a pretty beefy system, so that could definitely be part of what's causing it. But we've got a nice variation there on action selection. So the next thing I want to show you guys is the new system for kind of adjusting animations, because on top of fine-tuning and calculating out the math as best as I can, I've also tried to add in some animation smoothing elements, which I'm sure you've noticed with some of the actions, as they might seem a little bit retimed or different adjustments. So let's see, it's in the Parkour animations. Oh no, wait. Testing anims. Sorry about that. I forgot where my animations were for a second. I got so many different folders going on here. All right, so we'll just go ahead and we'll pull up the safety vault here. Okay, so this is another big change because I was not happy with the default montage blend out, as well as a few other things. So I created my own versions of them. So the first thing you'll notice is we have a motion warp with offset and retime anim section. These are two new notifies that I've created. The retime anim section can actually basically adjust an animation during the window that's been defined. And it does use the set custom dilation. So it is going to be slowing down the skeletal mesh based off of whatever value. But what it does is that I noticed that with motion warping, if an object, let's say that the standard anim range, it might have been for about, a height of maybe 50 to 90 units, right? And if you go above that, it'll kind of go a little bit snappy to be a little fast. So I wanted to create something that'll help fix that. And this is where I came up with the retime anim section, which is essentially just a notify state where you can use custom time dilation if you want. If you have I just want to retime this section to this amount just to make the animation look smoother, you can use it for that purpose as well. However, if you want something that's going to be a system-based calculation, you can use the dynamic retime, which is basically just going to take whatever the condition type default is, which that condition is based off of this. So we got height and length. This way you can go based off how high up the object is or how long. This way for like elongated vaults and sliding and stuff like that, you'd be able to smooth out based off of distance. Now, once you set that value, so this is going to be based off of the default animation, you can then set what the retime value offset is. So this is just going to subtract a value. This just kind of helps maybe smooth out some places that might be playing a little too fast or a little too slow. But you can also set a max retime adjustment. So this is going to be like a clamp value, and it can't go below that. For example, a lot of the time I find 0.7 to 0.8 is a pretty good value, but it really just depends on the range that you're setting. But this does allow for some really, really, really cool stuff when it comes to retiming of animations. And, you know, one thing that I can show you on is this action here. We can see he goes up a lot slower and he drops a lot slower. Like that particular action is being redefined. So if I bring it up here, here it is. So you can see that retime is happening from here to here. And then it's not happening here. He's just doing his standard kind of elements here. And then it's going back into the retime for the fall. So this is really, really helpful for being able to just help correct some of that motion warping offset that happens due to just standard anim length durations. Now, the other thing is the motion warp with offset. This one is, I will say I'm particularly proud of this one. This is really cool. So I've taken the default root motion window and I've kind of changed it up a little bit and put all of the offsets into these windows now rather than being part of the primary setting structure. Two reasons. Basically, I didn't want them, the offsets, to be based off of an action category. I wanted them to be based off of the animation itself. The other thing is that ultimately, this just added so much more control. So rather than the warp points being, height or warp 1, warp 2, warp 3, warp 4, they're now actually going to be more intuitively named points. So you can see this one here, we've got height. So that's going to be the object height itself. So if I go and hit play here, you'll see yellow, that little yellow point there, that's the height point. Blue is the initial hit, or the light blue, I mean. The dark blue is the depth, and green is the land. So just so you guys know what you're looking at here, that's what those debug spheres are. Green is land, blue is length, yellow is height, and then that kind of aqua color, that's initial, or initial hit. So the way that we can now do that, or use the system, is we can now use the height in multiple forms, in multiple windows, no matter what's happening. So like for here, you can see that I've got height, and it's going forward and back, -50, up and down, -90. But I'm also using the height again here, but just bringing it forward and back, -45. What this means is that I can use the single point multiple times and just adjust it based off of what I need for the animation. This allows for things to be a lot more controlled and a lot more fine-tuned. Now, another thing that's really cool, again, I think, is that we have a lerp functionality that I've added into this as well. Now, for those of you who don't know, a lerp is essentially taking 2 vector points, and a value between 0 and 1 is going to represent how far how far the next point, the offset, is going to be in between those 2 points. 0 is going to be kind of like point A, 1 is point B, and 0.5 would be kind of like right in the middle. So what you can do now is if you check the use lerp box, you can set the lerp target name, and it'll lerp 0.5 if you set that. So like from here, we set this to 0.5. It'll actually lerp a value between the height and, let's say, for example, the length, and get the middle point between these two. But if you just uncheck this, it'll actually go ahead and just ignore these values altogether. And this is being used on, for example, the slide vault here, or no, safety vault. So if I go into the first one here, you can see that we're using lerp. Lerp target warp name is length, and we're using the warp target name of height. So it's going to get the lerp value of 0.5 between the height and the length. So it's kind of the two endpoints and getting the direct middle of the object. So there's some really cool stuff that you can do now to be able to modify how the behavior is going to be during the actual motion of the action. Now, the other thing is too, is we've added, again, we keep saying we, it's just me. I wish I had more people. I will say, I can't afford to pay any people. But anyways, so we got the warp orientation style here. Now you can see that we have actor, camera, and object normal. So I wanted to create something that allowed people to be able to modify the warp rotation per instance of the motion warping window. You know, realistically, when you go in and you add in the warp rotation into the outer update warp target, you know, you're just, whatever rotation you add in, that's it. And I wanted to give something that would allow you to be able to use more values. So we have the standard actor, so we can use whatever our actor is at the time of capturing the information. We're going to use that. You can also use camera. So by the time that it calls in, it'll actually get your camera orientation, or you can use an object normal. This is very useful for climbing specifically. So just to show you, Parkour, climb transition. Here we go. This and this. So like on this one here, you can see that I've got the warp orientation style set to the object normal. And this is basically just going to make it so that way by the time my character, reaches the height point here, he's actually going to be rotated towards the object regardless of, you know, which way I started, which you can see allows for some really, really, really nice adjustments as he goes up. So between the motion warp with offset, we now have offset inside of a newly created version of the motion warping window, as well as being able to lerp between multiple factors. You now have a full control over things. And again, we have multiple points now. I think it's height, length, land, sidewall, drop, initial. Those are all of the warp points. So like drop is going to be a drop off in the area. So like something like here. Sidewall is going to be anything validated like this. And the sidewall drop. Oh yeah, and then the height and length are obvious, you know, obvious values. You know, height and length. Land is only going to be used for actual landing. So like you can see on this one here, I actually don't have landing. But on anyone else that goes into either a falling state that I could possibly land from, so I'm trying to get back to my vault montages here, like this one. So you can see that we are going at the end here, the warp target name is land. So we are using the land point on all of these as best we can. Now, the one thing I'm sure you've noticed as I've been going up and over some of these points here is the actor is doing some interesting kind of landing animation where you can, you know, we're going up. That one might be too high. We'll start from over here. So if I go up over here, you can see he goes up. Whoop, what happened? Oh, I put land F. I accidentally added a letter. Let me fix that. There we go. All right, so if I go back, you can see he goes up and he lands at that position, and he does kind of a little like kind of, I don't know, fall forward, I guess, trying to like just reduce his forward velocity. Now you'll notice too here, it's hard to see because of the way I've got it being blended, but you know, the head drops down and there's a bit of a divot that happens whenever the actor starts going and landing. And that's actually also an additive landing animation. So inside of the system, now I'm probably going to end up setting this up as a data table in the same way that I did with the other animation structures. But excuse me. Right now it is just inside of the actual data table, or I mean inside of the system itself. But it's going to be structured the same way, so no reason I can't show you guys. So if we look inside of the parkour system itself, so we'll go to the third-person character. So this is just my character blueprint I've been using. In the parkour system here, you're going to see, where is it? Action land options, landing montage settings, and I've added in just for right now 3 different options. So this right here is just an idle land that I've added some additives to. And I created some blend masking and some interesting stuff just to make it blend a little bit better. And I'll be creating videos so that way you guys know how to do all this. Don't worry about that. But if I go back here, then we also have the landing front, which is the one you guys saw. And then if it goes beyond 2,500, it goes into a landing roll. Now, the reason why I wanted to select this and have it kind of work this way is because I wanted to add something that would allow for some follow-up actions whenever you're landing after a vault, a mantle, or, you know, something that's going to be maybe with a little bit of a velocity end when you're coming down. So what this is the max velocity for selection. So like we got 1,300, 1,800, and 2,500. And if you've ever worked with Z velocity, your character movement here, you'll know that if you go velocity, if I can type, get velocity, split destruct pin, this Z value here is ultimately like when you're going downwards is how fast you're falling at a downwards rate. And the more you're falling, the farther the distance you fall, the higher that value is going to be by the time you hit the ground, which makes it a very, very, very useful like calculating element for these types of things. So that's kind of why I just said, all right, we're just going to do it off of velocity. I had a few different ways that I was going to go about it, but I figured this was going to probably be the best. Now, as far as where and how it gets the velocity, if we go back to the parkour animations here, we'll bring up Vault. Here we go. So you're going to see this one here, capture player velocity. So this is actually just a simple function that just goes through, and at this point of the animation, it actually just goes and says, okay, what's our Z velocity based off of the current actor's downward position. Now, you might have to play around with this, you know, especially when you're using the retime, because the retime is going to slow down your overall character movement, but it does work really well. And I've tried to use it without like just jumping off of the thing, and the value does seem to match. So I'm going to be doing a lot more testing though. Don't worry, I'm going to be doing a lot of testing with this whole system. So, but you're going to use this if you're trying to use the actual like the landing animations. You're going to want to make sure to add the captured player velocity. But again, it's just a simple notify. Now, the other thing is that I've changed the final actions. The final notify. Used in the previous system, we were using two different notifies, which was reset parkour action and set climbing. Now it's just going to be end action notify, and you can see there's a ton of new options in here. So the free climb trace is going to be added in as well. It's just currently not in this particular setup yet. But you're going to notice we have blend out time, attempt landing selection, which is ultimately by checking this is how it's actually going and, you know, selecting an animation. If you don't have this checked, it won't do anything. And I do recommend not checking it for mantle actions. But if you want to, it's entirely up to you. But generally, you're not going to have a lot of downward Z velocity when you mantle. So I don't know if it's really going to select too much. In my experience, it hasn't. But you can, but it's mainly just for like falling and landing. So this way you can actually have that nice roll forward, that little scamper, you know. And then if you are using something that is a climbing type initiating action. So like for example, if I go into the climb transitions, montages, bring this one back up here. If I go to the end action notify, you'll see set climb on this one is true. Now, something just I do want to know, you're going to see the animation just decided to go into a T-pose. That's because the blend out is actually stopping the montage play at this time. And I don't know why, when it's not actually registering a proper skeletal mesh in the editor, it does this, but it does. So if you need to like set up and do like timing with your motion warp offsets or your retiming and all that stuff, just uncheck blend out. And you'll see that it does it just fine. But the second you re-hit it, it hits that notify, it goes into a T-pose. So just something to keep in mind. It's unfortunately something that is with Unreal Engine. It's not anything I can control per se. If I find a workaround, I will definitely be adding it in though. I'll tell you that right now. But fortunately, it's not a big hindrance. It's just you got to make sure to have this checked until you're ready to actually go ahead and use it. That's all. But with these new notifies though, we're able to add a lot more variation, a lot more functionality, and being able to just do a lot more in general. I mean, ultimately, you know, the whole goal of the system is to be able to provide almost an Assassin's Creed level parkour component, you know, something that will just be able to allow you to have as many actions, as many variations with some nice smoothing, in between everything. So we've got a bunch of things that are going to be added in to help really just make that overall selection that much better. And again, just keeping an eye on that FPS tracker, even while it's displaying all of these debug spheres, it's really not going down at all, and it's not dropping even slightly during execution. So now another thing too is that the system is still capable of detecting openings and things like that. Right now, it's still I haven't stopped it, but you'd see that it's calculating the space there. I have not put sliding animations in this project yet because I've been working on other things. But you can see here, we've got the area here is being blocked. So there's going to be an entirely different execution. I suppose I shouldn't have said that ground actions are all going to be. There's going to be a couple of variations. For example, enclosed is going to be one, because this way you can have as many variations of animations based off of what the enclosure type is. Both the height, the length, width, how long the enclosure is. There'll be a trace that'll kind of just detect whether or not it's going all the way to back here or if it's to right here. And these are just things I haven't added in yet, but or I have actually added, but they're just not at their show stage yet. But we've got a lot more going on now to where we can really just attach to anything. And again, you can see we've got, because it found this, let me just pull that forward. There. So if I go play from here, you'll see that it stops me from going forward. So we've added checks to the top to make sure that you don't keep going during ledge validation areas. We've also added, or I keep saying we, I've also added some additional blocker checks, so that way in case something like this is in your way, play from here. So once we get to like right here, we're immediately blocked. So now this is as far as we can go. But again, you can see I'm just using cube-based geometry, and it's just kind of doing exactly what you would expect it to do. Now, if I'm going to go ahead and take this off, take that out, and I want to show you guys without the traces in here. Just go ahead and move that out of the way, and then we'll delete that. So if I go ahead and I try to climb up this object here, again, because it's rounded, it will not let me. But if I do here, it will. Now I need to push in the trace, it looks like, a little bit more, so that way you can find that. But there is going to be a value. It's going to be like how far you want it to look for blocking items. So that's going to be something that you guys will be able to define as well. I just haven't opened up the setting yet, so I'm not going to bother going through the code and combing through, because this is only the first of the devlog videos. We're going to be doing probably at least, I'm hoping for one a week, maybe every Friday, at least until the system is complete. But we will, we'll see what happens. So the other, let's see, what have we got? We've covered the new motion warping stuff, the new offset menus, the new anim retiming, the new drop actions, an action selector there. All right, it looks like the only thing that I have left, as far as things that I'm ready to show you guys, is the dynamic jump feature. So inside of Unreal Engine, as you guys know, and I'm just going to use it here, we have a normal jump, which is based off of gravity settings and an arbitrary distance factor. Well, I wasn't a huge fan of that. I'm going to be honest. I like something that's going to give me a bit more control over what the distance is going to be. So I've created this, which, as you can see, pushes the actor exactly to the same spot every single time on the jump. Now, currently, this is just based off of a maximum trace distance, but as you can see here, no matter which way you're coming at it, no matter what the distance is, if it's far like this or close like this, it's getting the exact same point every single time, which makes it a really good feature for the upcoming point jump, which is basically like in Assassin's Creed, how you can, those little flagpole things that are on the top of buildings that you can stand on. There'll be something like that in there. There'll be balance beams and a whole bunch of other stuff. So all this stuff is going to be included and worked in. But again, just the kind of showing you guys some early stuff here. But But yeah, so I mean, ultimately, we've got the new action selection, we got the new execution for the actual actions themselves. And just so that way I can show you guys here too, is that the climb action, the start, you'll notice he just attaches, because I've set that for this height, just like in the animation selection for like vault actions. I've set that height to a certain value. So if I'm just to open it up, montage selection, climb actions. So you can see we've got 250 and 350. So anything that's, if it's above 250, then we're going to look and see if it's above 350. This one should actually be 400. But anyways, but this is basically how you're going to define it. So you can have multiple different climb initiating actions and have it change those actions based off of what the active climb type is going to be. And there's going to be ways that you can set the climb type now based off of a tag system. And there's going to be a collision helper, just like there was in the previous system, but it's going to be more just to help with certain object normals, just in case your walls might have, different variations in their direction and stuff. There's going to be a collision assistant helper and things like that. But my goal is to try and make this work in even the most complex of spaces, with the most weird geometry, and it'll still be able to be like, okay, hey, this is where we can climb, this is where we can vault, this is where we can mantle. So I'm really trying my best to make sure that everything that's going to be in the system is a logical and reasonable evaluation of things. So now there's really not a whole lot left here, guys. So I'm hoping, I will say I messed up this time. I did not schedule the stream. I was hoping to try and schedule the stream this way. Everything would have been, you guys knew what was happening. You could join up, see what was going on, but it's all good. I'll make sure to schedule the next one once I confirm that I'm going to be doing it. I might wait and not do one next week, but I'll do one the week after. Just because next week I'm going to be really working on, as you saw, like I've kind of got a lot of the ground action stuff, just some, minor cleanup and maybe some prioritization on the selection values. But ultimately, other than that, I do want to try and make it so that way there's going to be more climbing and more new stuff within the next one. So I might wait, might be a couple of weeks. Just keep an eye out for that notification, guys. But for those of you who are watching it after the fact, instead of live, totally cool. Happy you joined. But if you have any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, anything that you want to add in, feel free to go up into the comments section, or reach out to me on Discord. I'm always monitoring the Discord very actively. So but that's really going to close out the stream, guys. It's kind of the main points for right now anyways. We've got a much more robust climbing calculation system. We've got a lot more modular locations that you can use. Like you can see here, we even were able to find this because it was within our defined trace distance. So got a lot of new improvements, and I'm excited to go on this journey with you guys. I'm excited to share all this with you guys. So like I said, I'm not sure if it's going to be next week or the week after. I will make sure to put the notification up early this time. This way everybody knows what's happening and when. But it's going to close it out, guys. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope to hear some feedback from you guys. Stay tuned. And as always, stay animated.